Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some tips on how to incorporate read-alouds into your homeschool. For those of you who have seen some of my other videos or who read my blog, you know that read-alouds are a huge part of what we do in our house together in our homeschool, and it really is my favorite part of our day. Now, two concerns that I hear the most often when it comes to read-alouds are, the first one is we don't ever have time in our house or in our homeschool for read-aloud. That's the first one. And the second concern that I hear most often is either my kids can't sit for read-alouds or my kids aren't interested in read-alouds, something along those lines. So I'm just going to share some little tips that I have for you today that I've just learned in my adventure with read-alouds. So I'll start out with not having time in your homeschool. And I hear that quite a bit, and I think the reason that a lot of people don't have time for it is because a lot of people tend to not count it among the important things to do. You know, they're considering all of the major subjects and all of the textbooks maybe that they're using as being important, and read-alouds are something that they kind of do for fun, or that they kind of do maybe at the end of the day to wind down, sometimes at bedtime. And I know that I used to read to my kids at bedtime, and what I found was happening was I was always exhausted from going and going and going all day long, and then at bedtime the last thing I wanted to do was sit and read. And I know some people are huge on bedtime stories, and that is fantastic, but that is not the only time that you can read to your kids. So if you really want to make read-alouds a priority in your homeschool, I really recommend that you do them at the beginning of your homeschool routine. Whether it's, you know, after your devotions or in your morning time. I just want you to remember that read-alouds are just as important as all of those major subjects that you're doing. And I do want to add that a lot of these read-alouds can actually take the place of some of those major subjects that you're doing. For example, you know, when my kids were learning about the Vikings, our read-aloud was actually a book called The Vikings. And you know, that was our history. So we didn't have to do our read-aloud and then later on go on to a history textbook. That was our history. You know, we would just incorporate some narrations and maybe some mapping with it. But you really want to remember, as I always say, you want to consolidate your subjects. And read-alouds are a fantastic way to do that. So if you're finding that you're not finding enough time in your homeschool day to do read-alouds, really try to work them in as one of your subjects. So think about that. So first, do it at the beginning of your homeschool day, or I should say, and put it towards one of your major subjects. Just like I said with my notebooking video about when you do notebooking, you should do it instead of something else. If your homeschool day is so packed with stuff to do that you're finding you don't have time to read to your kids, think about doing your read-alouds instead of something else, because they are no less important than anything else. And you know what? As educational as they are, they're also a fantastic bonding time with your kids. So when we do our read-alouds, that is really, after we do our devotion time, our read-aloud is the very first thing that we do. It's kind of how we ease into our homeschool day. So that is what I would say is the best tip that I can give you for working it into your day. I want you to actually schedule it. You know, if you're somebody who does planners and who actually writes out what you're going to do, I want you to write it down and put it at the very beginning, okay? Now, the second tip that I have for you is for those of you who have kids who either don't like read-aloud time or simply aren't used to it, I just want you to remember that if you are new to read-alouds, not all kids will just all of a sudden, just like that, sit perfectly still and really listen intently to everything that you're reading. My kids were not like that. With my kids, I actually had to do small steps with them when we started doing our read-aloud time. So we didn't jump into this, you know, reading novels and having my kids sit for 30 to 45 minutes while I was reading to them. We did small steps, you know, so you can start out with picture books. And even if your kids are a little bit older, there are a lot of shorter books that are fantastic even for your older kids. I would also say that if you are going to go right into a chapter book, which most of the time, if you have an older child, that's what you're going to tend to do. You want to keep your reading sessions shorter, okay? So if your kids aren't used to sitting while you're reading to them, maybe start out with 5-minute periods. And then after you've done that for a little bit, maybe move to 10 minutes and then 15 minutes. And you have to give your kids the freedom, or the opportunity to just kind of grow into this. And I know that I also, as the reader, I appreciated this, because not all parents are ready to just all of a sudden jump into reading out loud for 45 minutes every single day. We also have to be able to kind of transition ourselves into that. So that works great for the parents too, the ones who are actually doing the reading. Start out small and just work your way up. And I want you to remember that I do hear of families who read for maybe an hour or two at a time. And if that is not for you, don't do it. The longest that we will usually read together is about 30 minutes. The rule that I have with my kids, because again, you have to know what your kids can handle. You have to know what you can handle. But what I've done in my house is that if we're reading, we usually read by chapters. But if the chapter is 20 pages or longer, I will cut it in half, and we will do it over 2 days. So the most pages that I will read per day is about 19 pages per day. And then it might take about 30 minutes to read it, sometimes 45 minutes, because we do stop and do narration in the middle of this. So don't feel like you have to be reading for really long amounts of time, and don't feel like you have to jump right into it, reading for really long periods right away. Now, another thing that a lot of parents ask is how to get their kids to sit still for read aloud time. And I have seen so many people recommend to allow your child to fidget while they're doing their read aloud time. Maybe they let their kids walk around the room. You know, as long as they stay in the same room, they will let them walk around. Or sometimes they will let their kids play with Legos. Or just do quiet things as long as they stay in the same room where the read aloud is taking place. So I actually did that. I used to allow my kids to play with their Shopkins, or I would let them play with Play-Doh, color, those sorts of things. I actually used to print out pictures that had to do with what I was reading about. What I found though with my kids, now the fidgeting may work great with your kids. This is one of those things that you really just have to figure out what your kids can do. But with my kids, what I found out was that I thought, oh, that's a great idea to let them fidget, because my kids, they like to move all the time. So I did that. You know, I let them play with their Shopkins and everything. But what I found was that when I would ask them what I had read about, they would have no idea, because some kids are good at doing something with their hands while listening to something else. But other kids really need to have their attention focused on one thing at a time. And what I found is that's how my kids are. They really do need to have their attention on one thing. Now, I don't want to say that I don't ever let my kids, that they have to sit there like this the entire time. It's not like that at all. Sometimes I will even tell them, you can draw if your drawing has something to do with what I'm reading about. Say if I'm reading something from Little House in the Big Woods, and you want to draw a picture of something that I'm reading about, if they would want to draw a picture, say, of them getting sap out of the tree, then yes, do that, because that's a form of narration. So that is fine. If they want to draw, it has to be about something that we're reading about. So that is really something for you as the parent to just try out. If your kids are good at doing something with their hands while listening to you, then that's a great tip for you to use to get your kids to really enjoy read aloud time. If your kids are more like mine, and if they really don't like to sit still, just get them a little spiral notebook and have them draw pictures of what you're reading about as you're reading it to them. That is what my kids have done. And that is really, I'm going to be honest, that's the only type of, quote, fidgeting that I'll allow during read aloud time, is just because you want your kids to be able to listen to the read-alouds, especially if you are doing these read-alouds instead of something else. You do really want to make sure that they are paying attention and that you do have them, you know, listening to what you're saying. So that's really important too. But if anyone has any other questions about read-alouds, you can leave a comment. Sometime in the future, I will do a video that is more about what our personal read-aloud time is like. But in the meantime, if you have any tips for read-alouds, also, before I even go, I just want to go over the tips that I did one more time. It's transition into it, small steps, you know, start reading shorter and then move on to longer periods of time reading. The next tip was make sure that you actually do it maybe in the beginning of your homeschool, or at least pencil it in and consider it to be as important as everything else that you're doing. And the other thing is to give your kids, you know, the freedom to fidget if they can do that. If not, maybe think about something else, you know, like drawing what you're reading about. But there, you know, and I have to tell you that there is no foolproof way to having a perfect read aloud time. And I know that that was one of my downfalls, is I would always kind of get frustrated when I saw that my kids were maybe not sitting as still as I thought they should, or I thought that they weren't paying attention like I thought they should. And I think it's because I had this picture in my head that my kids were the only kids who had issues with this, and that everyone else's kids were just wonderful at sitting still and listening. And that's really not how it is. When I've talked to people, most families do have kids that really do move around a bit. So there is, just as with homeschooling, there's no perfect read aloud time. And I really want to push this onto you, is to know that nothing is perfect in anyone's house, ever. So anyway, that is my encouragement to you. If you have any questions, again, leave a comment. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to subscribe, I encourage you to press that subscribe button. And I hope you have a great day.